It's on everybody's top 5 list of legendary creatures, the Loch Ness Monster. Sightings date back to the 6th century. And just when you think the creature and the legend may have died down, some new eyewitness accounts pop up to remind you the story is still very much alive. This is Loch Ness, a mist-shrouded lake in the Scottish Highlands. Its waters a murky, black ink, dark enough to hide one of the most iconic and elusive beasts of all time.
I thought I'd seen it all in Loch Ness, but this is just something I've seen that I can't explain, so.
It's July 2020. Firefighter and lifelong Loch Ness resident Ross McCauley is overlooking the water from the shore when he records this.
It's 12 feet long, about 4 feet wide, grey in colour. It seemed to be moving into the waves against the wind, occasionally breaking the surface.
Take another look. The image is hard to see, so let's zoom in, slow it down, and outline the figure in the water. And Ross's sighting isn't the only recent one of its kind. In September 2019, Stephen Chalice is on vacation when he snaps this unbelievable photo.
I'm guessing that what I saw was 8 foot long, but there might have been a bit more either end of that underneath the water, so you could be still talking about a fish that was 10, 12 feet long.
Whatever this is, it's massive.
Field researcher Ken Gerhardt is one of the world's foremost experts on mysterious creatures and is writing a book on Loch Ness. He has spoken to hundreds of eyewitnesses who swear Nessie exists.
The descriptions are very consistent, and this leads me to believe that, yes, in fact, there is a population of remarkable, immense animals in Loch Ness.
So are these just big fish stories or something more? We turn these amazing images over to our team of analysts to see if they would hold up under scrutiny. Our marine biologist, Dr. Shay Conger, begins her evaluation with the photos taken by Stephen Chalice. Could we be looking at some kind of fish? Conger says no.
It's emerging pretty prominently from the water, and you don't see any protruding fins.
Conger concludes that it must be some sort of massive marine mammal. But upon closer examination, she notices something else that seems a bit fishy.
When I look at this image, I see a couple of red flags. If an object or animal is submerged in water, we would see a series of eddies and ripples around the entirety of this animal, extending out pretty far. Instead, what we see are a series of regular waves surrounding this animal and a small trailing wake behind it.
Based on those suspicions, we turn the photos over to our forensic video analyst, Michael Primo.
I performed what's called a smart report of the digital image that was provided, and it reported inconsistencies with the digital information. So in layman's terms, the picture of the alleged Loch Ness Monster is not an authentic image.
But what about the McCauley video? We have no reason to believe it's a hoax.
It's a pretty calm day, which means that whatever's on the surface of the water is not a wave or other associated item. I can say that there is probably a large object here.
So what is it? Conger says she can also rule out a log or any other inanimate object, but she does have a theory.
A recent study utilizing eDNA was able to identify that there are, in fact, eel species within this lake. It's possible that some of these species could be large. However, they are, as of yet, undefined.
So we have a split decision this time. The unbelievable photos of the Loch Ness Monster are exactly that, unbelievable. The wave motion of the wake was the decider. As for the video, we think it's real, and we think it's an eel. Still, sociobiologists believe that because of our history as a prey species, humans will always be fascinated by stories of animals big enough to eat us. This is the Barents Sea, located between Russia and the North Pole. It's one of the most remote and unexplored places on Earth. And one deep-sea fisherman there has brought creatures to the surface that are so bizarre, his Instagram account has made headlines. Fish with bulging lips, what looks like human dentures, and fluorescent red-colored eyes. Creatures with heads shaped like aliens. The images are so bizarre, and there are so many of them. Journalist MJ Banayas, who covers the unexplained, says it's made people wonder if there's something unnatural going on below.
These creatures look so bizarre that people naturally question something's wrong. One theory is that these aren't natural animals, but rather the product of some sort of bizarre mutation.
Look again for yourself. Mutation seems like a reasonable explanation for this. And it turns out the idea of mutated Russian fish may not be far-fetched, as our military expert Tim McMillan explains.
Any government that has any kind of nuclear proliferation program has always had this problem of how do you get rid of your waste? And for a number of years, the Soviet Union's answer was dumping it into the Barents Sea. 17,000 nuclear containers, multiple different nuclear-powered ships were sunk, and an entire nuclear submarine. From a period of about the 1950s until the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Whoa. So the Soviets used the Barents Sea as a nuclear toilet bowl for decades. And as our physicist, Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi explains, radiation and DNA don't mix.
Radiation is really tiny subatomic particles that are flying along. And when they encounter a DNA molecule, they can strike it and break it and change it. So when DNA is subject to radiation, then what happens is the instructions for writing a new animal are changed. So you could end up with anything virtually.
A recent scientific study found that a Soviet nuclear submarine at the bottom of the Barents Sea was nearly 1 million times more radioactive than previously estimated. So are these freaky fish the result of all that dumping? Our marine biologist, Dr. Shay Conger, looks for answers. Conger looks first at the fish's shape and scales.
If these fish were impacted by radiation, we would expect to see strange bumps or protrusions on different parts of the body. But I don't see any signs of radiation sickness or poisoning throughout this animal. Its epidermal tissue actually seems to be pretty intact.
Okay, so Conger says these fish aren't the victims of a nuclear waste dump. But then what else could explain some of these bizarre features? Conger has a theory.
They undergo a process of what we call barometric trauma.
It turns out that some of these fish have the bends. When human divers come up too quickly from the deep, the change in pressure causes the gases in their body to expand. Well, same for fish.
Often these fish will come to the surface with their stomach sticking out of their mouth because of the extreme pressure of having the gases within their body tissues expand at such a quick rate.
But there's got to be more to this fish story, right? Conger says the real story was millions of years in the making.
Each species on Earth has a very predictable and well-defined evolutionary pathway that makes it what it is today. These animals aren't alien, they're just adapted to an extremely different environment than we're used to.
The jury is still out about the long-term effects this contamination will have on marine species. Dr. Conger cautions that the impact could take decades to be fully felt. For us, natural evolution and the bends explain these weird-looking fish. So our verdict? This is a non-nuclear phenomenon. In October 2019, a team of divers sets off to explore a sunken World War II ship off the Norwegian coast. Instead, they see this. The footage shows the team in a close encounter with a huge, drifting, gelatinous blob. The video is played all over the world, and it's not lost on people that these are the exact waters the dreaded legendary sea monster called the Kraken was known to inhabit. Look at it up close. The giant floating orb is as big as a person, and when the divers turn their flashlights on it, it appears as if the sphere is filled with hundreds of thousands of tiny creatures. Also inside is an orange mass. Some speculate that this is a tentacle. Captain Nils Bodne says he's never seen anything like it in 25 years at sea.
We didn't know what it was, and as we were swimming closer, it was actually bigger and bigger. It was like an alien thing in the water.
Field researcher Ken Gerhardt speculates whether this orb could actually be the spawn of the Kraken.
So the legend of the Kraken is probably one of the most celebrated sea monsters of all time. Based on its physical descriptions, the multiple arms, the massive size, And just the reputation for being very malevolent and snatching sailors off of ships.
Legends say that the Kraken could devour a ship's entire crew at once. But despite its fearsome reputation, the monster also seemingly had its benefits. It allegedly swam accompanied by huge schools of fish. Brave fishermen could risk going near the beast to secure a bountiful catch. Unfortunately, Captain Bodna said his team didn't have much air left in their scuba tanks, so they could only document this encounter for a few minutes. But our experts had plenty of time. Let's see what they have to say. Our video forensics expert, Michael Primo, examines the footage to determine if it's too good to be real.
The way that the light bounces off and through this object helped us to authenticate this frame by frame. So at this spot, we can see, again, translucent behavior of the subject behind the object and then some sort of shadowing from his reflection. So I'm leaning more toward that this object was real.
So if it's not a hoax, what is it? Marine biologist Dr. Shay Conger weighs in.
It could be jelly or cnidarian, which is a stinging animal. However, sea jellies have really distinct organelles and stinging cells and anatomies. This doesn't have any really defined and clear organs.
But apparently there are other deep-sea organisms that look like gelatinous blobs.
Maybe it's some really large form of a hooded nudibranch.
Conger says nudibranchs are sea slugs that secrete a sweet smell, often compared to watermelon, for defense purposes. But they are typically only about 4 inches long. So if it's too blobby to be a jellyfish and too large to be a nudibranch, what's left? Could it be an embryo from the legendary Kraken? Maybe, in a way. The Kraken was an exaggerated version of an animal we now know to be real.
We really can attribute historical sightings of the Kraken to known squid species today, like the giant and colossal squid. I wouldn't say it's out of the frame of possibility.
In fact, we've seen live and dead versions of both species dating back to 1853. And it's believed they can grow to nearly 60 feet. So maybe it is a Kraken egg. But not so fast. After a DNA analysis of the mass, scientists are issuing a new opinion.
It was determined that this was actually the egg casing of a short-finned squid. That's really cool because this object appears to be extremely large. But in reality, it was the egg case of an animal that's only about 1 foot long. So it's possible that such a small organism can lay such a huge egg casing because it's just full of water.
The lesson here is that in the ocean, small things can come in large packages. So our verdict? This is the egg sac of a short-finned squid. But what about that orangey mass in the center? Scientists believe it's probably ink from the female squid who injected it while making the sphere. London, England, March 2016. A passenger is enjoying a scenic ride in a cable car overlooking the fabled Thames River, when something in the water below catches his eye and he manages to capture this shaky but shocking footage. The video is unsteady and unfocused, so let's slow it down and zoom in. It appears to show a dark shape as it surfaces momentarily and then dips back beneath the murky waters. For field researcher Ken Gerhardt, this might be proof of an impressive discovery.
The humps are characteristic of alleged sea monster accounts from around the world. So this could potentially be something unknown.
The video naturally went viral, with people comparing the creature to the Loch Ness Monster and another legendary creature.
The Lake Windermere monster, or Nessie, is an aquatic creature that's been reported from Windermere Lake in northern England, which is one of the largest lakes in England. And sightings are fairly recent for the most part.
Gerhardt notes that all famous sea monsters seem to share some common traits. Could they also share a common ancestor?
All of our lake monsters worldwide seem to dwell in cold water lakes along the lines of latitude from 40 to 60 degrees north, and with the highest concentration along the latitude line of 50 degrees. And the physical descriptions are also very similar. massive serpentine animals ranging anywhere from 15 to 30 feet across.
Field researcher Cliff Barackman says there's an even stranger possibility that stems from urban myths dating all the way back to the Victorian era.
There is a theory that what people are seeing is actually some sort of escaped crocodile or an alligator. People have reported seeing swans sucked from the top of the water and dragged underneath to their deaths. What's doing that? Maybe it is one of these escaped alligators or crocodiles or something like that.
For Gerhardt, though, the possibilities are quite limited. Sea monsters, as he said, or something equally big.
We could be dealing with some type of whale that strayed out of the ocean and came into fresh water. And in fact, this behavior has been documented before.
50 years ago, the Thames was so polluted it was considered to be biologically extinct. Since then, new protections have been put in place to restore the river, and the wildlife has returned. Could this be nature healing itself with a vengeance? Let's see what our experts have to say. When our marine biologist, Dr. Shay Conger, analyzes the video, she has her doubts about one popular online theory making the rounds.
Some people have speculated that this could be a submarine temporarily coming above the surface of the water. This doesn't look like a submarine to me because we don't see anything like a periscope. Rather, it's just kind of ambiguous humps.
Now, Dr. Conger has told us before that pollution could lead to strange mutations, but she doubts that this is some kind of giant mutant croc.
Crocodiles or alligators are exothermic animals that are adapted to warm environments. And the Thames is a fairly cold water estuary, and they would have a really hard time surviving here.
So what about a wayward whale? It wouldn't be the first time. A young minke whale was actually spotted in the Thames as recently as 2021.
If I had to guess, this looks something like a whale or other very large creature. The size of this object does fall within several large whale species. And in fact, humpback whales have been discovered in the Thames. And there's also been other species of whales that have been found here, including bottlenose whales.
Wildlife biologist Dr. Stephanie Shuttler respectfully disagrees. She thinks there's something fishy about the video.
It doesn't look like any sort of sea animal. It has these points emerging from the water. Whales and dolphins are really smooth, and it doesn't seem to be moving like an animal. We're not seeing it shift at all, and we see this dark shadow, but again, that's not moving at all. The other suspicious thing is when we see the so-called animal start to submerge, we don't see that dark spot disappear. So I think what we're seeing is just something added. I think this is some sort of altered video.
So yes, this could be a hoax, but based on Dr. Conger's analysis, we're going to call this one an unidentified creature. I, for one, am calling this just another reason I'll never be taking a dip in an English river. With a length of nearly 4,000 miles, the Yangtze is the third longest river in the world. Its waters are home to several unique aquatic species. But in September 2019, a viral video captures an image of something unprecedented. Taken from a ferry dock, the video captures what looks like a mysterious creature slithering along the surface of the water. You can't see a head, but that sure looks like a powerful tail. And eyeballing its size relative to its distance from the dock and the height of this man observing the scene, it appears to be at least 10 feet long. Once the video goes viral, it racks up tens of millions of views, and a new legend is born.
People dubbed the creature the Three Gorges water monster. Some have speculated that this creature could actually be a giant water snake or eel of some kind that has mutated and become huge thanks to pollution.
Field researcher Ken Gerhardt has extensively studied many of the legendary beasts said to inhabit the waterways of China.
In this part of the world, there are legends of mythical serpent-like creatures. You have the dragons known as the Lung, which are described as huge and serpentine and scaly, with 4 stubby limbs, each with 5 claws. There's also the Naga, described as dark and serpentine, up to 40 feet in length.
So what is this mysterious object slithering through the water? It doesn't seem to be tied to anything towing it along. What does that mean? Let's check with our experts.
First, we take the video to our marine biologist, Dr. Shay Conger.
What we see in this video is what appears to be a pretty large animal that appears to have some sort of a tail that's moving back and forth.
Dr. Conger's first guess is that this might be some kind of large eel, but the largest known eel, coincidentally called the European conger, has never been sighted in these waters.
I don't think there's species of eel that are as large as this in the area.
Conger says when it comes to endemic Yangtze River creatures, there are plenty of cool candidates.
One of the unique animals to the area is the giant salamander. It can get up to 6 feet long and weigh over 100 pounds. But I don't think this is a giant salamander because it has a lot of irregularities on the top of it. And if this were a type of salamander, we would expect this would be kind of a smooth animal with a smoother, longer tail moving through the water.
Dr. Conger wonders if this might be the elusive Chinese sturgeon, which can reach lengths of 16 feet.
They evolved over 100 million years ago, so they're, in essence, living prehistoric animals. However, sturgeon have really defined tail fins that would be sticking above the surface of the water. And because I don't see that type of fin or tail, I can conclude this probably isn't a sturgeon.
So could it just be a hoax? We ask our resident video forensic expert, Michael Primo.
I don't see any major splicing that took place throughout this object as it's swimming, if you will. I do not believe that this recording has been doctored or manipulated with malicious intent.
But Primo digs deeper and finds a telltale sign that things may not be as they seem.
When we look at the ripples as this object is traveling through the water, there is no definitive pattern as it's traveling through the water that we would expect to see from something that we know is like a fish or a shark. There are some unnatural behaviors. Upon further investigation, we came across this recording that is allegedly a dark-colored rubber airbag.
Primo suggests that's not a tail propelling a creature through the water, just a strong Yangtze current moving one end of the big airbag back and forth.
So it is possible that this is what we were actually seeing in the river, and it wasn't actually some sort of river monster.
So, about the theory that the Yangtze River monster was created by pollution. Turns out that's true. But it's not an overgrown snake. It's a long black rubber industrial airbag, likely discarded by a nearby shipyard. But still, there is a lesson here. More and more of the Yangtze's unique aquatic life is going extinct due to pollution and overfishing.